Let's learn. Kumlen Lablat Gemara, Mitzvah Shabbos Parshas Kadeshim. We're up to Daf Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. So actually, Samach Amud Beis, the very bottom of the page. Okay, so the last thing we learned was from Rab Shimon ben Yochai, and we learned now another din of Shimon ben Yochai. Rab Shimon ben Yochai said before that a convert, if she was under 3 years old, a kohen can marry her. Because he was learning that the reason why you're not allowed a kohen is not allowed to marry a convert is because she is a zoina, because she would have had relations. However, if she's under 3 years old, the relations don't matter anyway, so therefore it's all right. The Chachamim argue, they say that it's Xeris HaKosov, Mahatorah, that a Gieris is a zoina, and therefore it is forbidden. That's how most Rishonim learn Pshat. Other Rishonim learn Pshat is that, that the Chachamim say that every Gieris is had relations, and therefore they're a zoina. So we just put them all in the same category. And now the Gemara says, there's another thing Rab Shimon Yochai said. Rab Shimon Yochai said the following. Kivrei oivdei kachavim. The grave, now we know that there's different ways of becoming tamei. One is if you touch, let's say, a corpse, maga. One is if you lift a corpse, masa. And one is oil, if you share the same roof. If you're inside the same room and there's a corpse there, so they become tamei. So Rab Shimon Yochai is of the opinion that not when it comes to a goy, however, there's no law of oil. Kivrei oivdei kachavim. He holds that the kaver of a goy ain't a metamid ba'oil. It is not metamid ba'oil at all. That means a kohen is allowed to be in the same room as a goy. If there's a morgue and it's just goyish, your body's there, there's not a problem whatsoever. And Shnema, and how do we know that? The pasuk says, "Ba'aten tzoini, you are my sheep, tzoin marisi, my flock, Adam atem, that you are Adam atem, that you are people." So we darshan, atem kriyim Adam. Only you are called Adam. Only Jews are called Adam. Because it says Adam Atem. The Ein Ha'oivdei Kachavim Krin Adam. And Goyim are not called Adam. And the pasuk that talks about oil, it says Adam Yevamos Ba'oil. So we find the word Adam there, which is not a very common word in the Torah. So who is the Torah referring to? Only to Yidden and not to Goyim. And this is the whole issue about kohenim flying on airplanes. So and the vast majority of the kfarim, if they fly over it, which is an oil, would only be over goyish kfarim, and according to it's not an issue whatsoever. Now, interesting, the Gemara says that Adam is referring to Yidden. Tais already asks, we're going to learn in the Gemara in Sanhedrin that it says that if a goy learns Torah, Rab Meir says, he's treated like a kohen gadol, because the pasuk says in Parshas Achrei, we just read, Asher yasa oisa Adam v'chai bohem, that if a person does it, he will live with it. And ha'adam includes goyim. It's a generic term. It's inclusive. Yet our Gemara says that adam atem only refers to Yidden. So Rabbeinu Tam comes along and says there's a difference between the word adam and ha'adam. It's the hey. Adam is specifically the Yidden. Ha'adam, because there's an extra hey, that hey includes goyim as well. That's
Adam Kiyamos is without a hay. That's talking about
exactly. That's why it's only Yidden and not Goy. That's what Shimon Yochai says. Now, very interesting in the famous Mendel Bayless case, and which he was accused, the blood libel and all that. So when all these different lawyers are there and different rabbis, and they were asked all kinds of questions. So what the prosecutor was saying, you see, it says Adam Atem, that only Eden are called Adam and not Goyim. That proves that we look at Goyim as if they are subhuman, and therefore it's believable about the blood libel. So this particular Rav, and I can't remember his name, got up and he said, "I'll explain you what Pshat the Gemara is." We have 4 different words to describe people. We have Enosh, Gever, Ish, and we have Adam. The difference between the 4 are that 3 of them, you can make them in plural. So Ish becomes Ishim, Enosh becomes Anoshim, Gever becomes Gaborim. But Adam, there's no plural. A single person is called Adam, and many people are called Adam, which means, when the Gemara says here that Yidden are different than Goyim is, that we are all one unit. And he said the best proof here is, as the Yid called Mendel Bayless, most Jews in the world never heard of him before. And look who you have here in the court. You have so many rabbis and lawyers trying to defend him. That is what a Yid is. We're Adam. We're always single. We're always single, and no matter how many Yidden there are, we're all one unit. We all feel each other. That's what the Gemara means. Atam Kriim Adam v'lo umas Adam Kriim Adam. And they were very impressed with that answer. Anyway, let's continue the Gemara.
Sorry, just whilst we're on this topic of Tumas Oihel, can you also a question? Kohanim sometimes don't go into a hospital as well.
Let's finish the Gemara, then I'll ask. One second, let's finish the Sugya. So the Gemara is not over yet. The Gemara have a question. Meisvei, I'll ask you a question. It says a pasuk by Midyan, when they calculated the toll, how many people died. It says there, the Nefesh Adam, it talks about the Midyanim, it says there, Nefesh Adam Shisha Asar Aleph. Talks about the Midyanim, the Goyim, and it says 16,000 people. It says the word Adam. When it comes to Goyim, what do you tell me that Adam only refers to Yidden? So when it answers, Mishum Behema, because it also says in the pasuk regarding how many animals they took from them, and therefore compared to a behemoth, how will you describe then the people of Midian? So we have no choice but to call them Adam. But if it's Stam Adam, there's nothing, you're not trying to contrast it to behemoth. Stam and pasuk Adam is referring only to Yidden. So then the Gemara says by Ninveh in Yoina, it says there when it describes Yoina, it says there Asher Yeshba, how many people lived in Ninveh? It says Harba, a lot more than Shteim Esed, a lot more than 120,000 Adam people. And Asher Yoda Beimilas, but I don't know the difference in right and the left. And then the pasuk concludes with Behema Rabbah, many animals. So again, it says Adam referring to the people in Ninveh that were Goyim. And again, the Gemara answers Mishum Behema. Because the pasuk includes Behema Rabbah, so therefore, in comparison to that, you call the people there Adam. Doesn't prove anything. Then the Gemara says, okay, it says a pasuk called Horig Nefesh, anyone who kills somebody, if you touch any of the corpses. Tischato, you have to then go ahead in 7 days, you have to go spend. And this is by the story of Midian, and says that you have to cleanse yourself, and you have to have the paraduma, and you have to 7 days. Now the question is, if you're telling me that they are not contaminating, they don't spread any tumor, the goyim, why would the Yidden during the war, after the war, have to go ahead and wait 7 days to become cleansed? That's no proof, because Dilma iktil chad Yisrael. Who said that on account of the goyim that they killed, maybe a couple of Yidden got killed, and then people might have touched the body, and therefore they have to go ahead and retire themselves. So the Gemara says the Rabbanon said no. It's definitely the Rabbanon argue Shemichai say definitely goyim do generate tumor, and we see by Midian. Maybe it was a Yid. It says in the pasuk not one Jew died, no, but not one Jew was lost. So we see clearly that no Yidden were killed, so the only one were Goyim, and yet the Yidden had to go ahead and cleanse themselves. Rab Shimon Yochai, he says that Goyim are not Matame. So the Goyim are not Matame, the only reason why they had to cleanse themselves is because the Yiddish are corpses, but it says Lo Nifkud, many, nobody died. So he learns Lo Nifkud many ish means La Avera, that none of the Jews there committed any sins or had other interests or other agendas in mind. That's all it means. But Yidden did die, according to Shimon Yochai, and that's why they were Tameh. However, Ravina comes along and he says there's a different by Goyim Nihi Demaitinu Kramat Muye Ba'oil. All Rav Shimon Yochai is saying is that there's no tumor of oil by Goyim. The Chsiv Adam Ki Yamos Ba'oil, it says the word Adam regarding oil. But Memaga Masa Mimaitina Krab. But if you touch a Goyish corpse, or if you lift a Goyish corpse, a Yid will become Tameh. And therefore, because they touched the Midyanim and they killed them, that's why they have to cleanse themselves. So according to Rav Shimon ben Yochai, there's no oil whatsoever by a goy, but according to the second answer to the Gemara, there is maga mas. So there's a big machlekes rishonim who the halacha is like. Is the halacha like Rav Shimon ben Yochai? And the proof of that is we're going to learn about Metzia and Kuf Yudala there that Elo Yohanavi was a kohen, his Pinchas was standing by a caver, and they asked him, "What are you doing here by a caver? You're becoming tummy." And by the way, that's the proof that we have that Pinchas and Eliyahu were the same person. That what are you standing by a caver? You're a kohen, and he said because goyim are not matame. So you see clearly from there that the halach is like Rav Shimon ben Yochai, and that's what the number of Rishonim paskin. Other Rishonim totally disagree, And they say the fact that our Gemara starts off, V'chein hoyer Rab Shimon ben Yochai, that Rab Shimon ben Yochai said this law as well. He said many laws, countless laws. Why all of a sudden we have two laws here? And the Gemara is trying to tell you, just like we do not rule like Rab Shimon ben Yochai regarding a kohen marrying a convert who converted under 3 years old, we also do not rule like Rab Shimon ben Yochai when it comes to the caver of a goy, and there is oil by a goy, and you should not be in a hospital with a morgue, even though there might be goyish bodies in that morgue. And what about the proof of Eliyahu Hanavi by the caver? So these are Rishonim say that you have a number of Gemaras where you find that they just give them brush them off with some answer, even though it's not the real answer. The real answer is because most coffins there's an opening wider than a tefach between the body and the lid, and therefore that contains the tum inside. It doesn't go up. In Shulchan Aruch rules that like Rab Shimon ben Yochai, the Ramah says like Rab Shimon, but he says everyone should be machmir, and that's why we the kohenim are machmir, even if there are only goyim in the morgue, you shouldn't really enter the hospital if it's under one roof.
But just a question on that. I mean, I might have my memory may not serve me well, but when we were learning sukkah, and then we had this discussion, or maybe it was Eruvin, and we had the discussion of 2 levels, a double-story house, and then the first the floor or the ceiling of the floor and the ceiling of the one, I think there were boards, and the tumah was under one board, which meant that the tumah didn't go up to the second level. So if that's the case, then if the first level has a roof, in other words, which is the floor of the upper level, then and the body is kept on the lower level, then how does it get to the top level? Why can't it go on level 7?
Doors. It goes through the door. The tumah goes out through the door and spreads everywhere. We were learning the Gemara Eruvin. There was about if you have a skylight. Remember, it was a skylight, and it goes straight up, but not. But if there are doors, then the tumah goes through the door.
Goes through the doors and then upper level. Everywhere.
Yeah, if there are doors, it continues going up. There, we're talking about there's no passageway between.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, Mishnah.
Can we rule just like what you do before? You said we ruled not like Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai that Kohen.
No, I said the halacha. The Shlomo brings both opinions. The Ramah concludes that the halacha is like Rav Shimon Yochai, that there is no oil by goyim, but everyone should be machmir. In other words, basically he rules that you have to follow the Rabbanan who argued Rav Shimon Yochai. But when it comes like to an airplane or that, almost everyone is makel, right? Nobody sits there in plastic wrapped around them, because we say that the oil, the halacha technically is that there's no oil by a goy, and therefore, first of all, there's a suffix if you even go over a cemetery, and even if you do, the halacha technically you don't have to, so therefore, no one is machmir. Practically, no one is machmir. For that reason. Can't hear you. You're muted.
What happens if you're on a plane to Eretz Yisrael?
And
often there's a body being taken on the plane. You're on the same. Plane.
The way they transport a body is in a way, like I was just telling you, they make sure there's a tefach between the body and there's a crate around it, and so on and so forth. And Simon can tell you a bit more details on that. But they do it in a way that halachically the tumah is contained inside. In the El Al planes itself, they built a cavity, a room, which the whole room is basically segregated from the rest of the plane. It comes up differently. But even other planes, they put it in a certain kind of crate, a coffin inside a crate with a certain span, a certain space, a gap between. Simon, is that right?
Yes and no. But yes, the last nifter, the last mace that we transported had a coffin that we designed, or that we had designed to allow kahana. But I wouldn't say it's the klal. Not every coffin that we send to overseas is constructed for kahanim to be able to fly. I don't know if that's a klal with every Chavei Kedusha that they make coffins suitable for kahanim to fly in. I don't know.
But El Al definitely built the planes in a way to make sure that
correct. Correct. But that works if you're going if it's an El Al flight from say New York or from wherever. Then they've got their thing. But from here, when you're going on the Cathay or another flight, then it's not so. Yeah, it doesn't always.
There's no
work.
reason for it unless there's a special request.
Right. Correct. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Mishnah. What happened? We already had this in Gemara before. Iras Salmana, you got engaged, a kohen got engaged with a widow, which is permitted, and then Vinisman Elias Kohen Gadol. And then suddenly he was appointed to become the Kohen Gadol. The din is Yichnes, he can marry her. We had the Gemara before already because she didn't, we had this extra pasuk Isha, and she hasn't changed from before, so therefore we use the pasuk to say that you can go ahead and marry her. Umaisa, there's a story of Yeshua ben Gamla, she Kiddush as Marta Basbaisis, this woman Marta Basbaisis got engaged, very wealthy woman, got engaged to Yeshua ben Gamla. Umeneyu Hamelech, Lias Kohen Gadol, the king appointed that he should become the Kohen Gadol, the concept. And he went ahead and then he married her, even though now he's a Kohen Gadol, he married her. So we see from here that as he got as a Kohen Hedjed, he was allowed to get engaged to a widow. He became Kohen Gadol afterwards, no problem. What about the other case? Shemeres Yavam. What about his sister-in-law? His brother passed away, and now she's waiting to marry him. Shenafel lived in a Kohen Hedjed, and the law is that he can go ahead and marry her. But then Vinismana Leah is Kohen Gadol, but now she's an almana, and he became a Kohen Gadol. Alpha Pisha also, even though they did a maimed, so with Rabbana, they're already as if they're married. Hareza Lo Yichlin should marry her. You shouldn't marry her at all, because they're not married yet, so therefore he's not allowed to go ahead. The next night of the Kohen Gadol, he shouldn't be marrying the widow. Says the Gemara, tell them we learn. Minayin, how do we know she is a almana if he got engaged to almana and his man is Kohen Gadol, then became a Kohen Gadol? How do you know she is allowed to marry her? It says Yikach Isha. The pasuk says that he should, that a Kohen Gadol should not marry a widow or a divorcee, a chalala or a zayna. He shouldn't take, but only a psula from his nation. Yikach Isha. He can take her as a wife. So there's another wife that he can take besides the psula, and that is someone that was as almana. He married her, he got engaged to her, and now he married her. But then we said by Bagetis, you're not allowed to, because the girl we lived on before, because she actually changed. He got engaged to her when she was a psula, when she was, she wasn't yet. Then she became a Bagetis before they got married. Not allowed to because she actually changed. Only a wife. If he was already, his wife, partially wife, not if in the case of a sister-in-law. It sounds like that the king appointed him this man, not that by itself. I see here corruption. The Amar Avasi, she actually paid for his position. She's a very wealthy woman. She gave 3 kavim of golden coins to Yana Malka, to Yana the king. This is a different Yana the king, not the one we're learning Kedushin, who was a Kohen in his own right, Kohen Gadol. Until they appointed, she gave all the bribes to appoint her husband. So obviously the Gemara is saying it the derogatory way. But we're going to learn the Gemara about Basra. The Gemara says that Yeshua begamla baram zachar oisish latayv, that this person should remember it in a good way, because he started the whole education system that we have, which the whole world replicated, came from Yeshua ben Gamla. So how does that work? And here it sounds like he was not a very he wasn't deserving of being the Kohen Gadol. There's a baram zachar oisish latayv. So there's many answers. One answer, the simple answer we had in Gemara Yuma, Taisha says in Yuma, there were 2 Yeshua ben Gamlas, not the same person. Others are showing and say that he started out not deserving the position, but he grew in the job, and eventually he became a big tzaddik and a big chassid, and that's when we say that his name should be remembered. Others say he was always a good person, he was always a tzaddik. The problem only was that there were people probably more deserving than him, but because of her money, he got the position. Next Mishnah. Kohen Gadol shemes. Kohen Gadol now marry a widow. So what happens if his brother dies and now his sister-in-law, you can't marry her? So what do you do? And the chiddush is, and we'll see that you have to give chalitza. We would have thought you don't even give chalitza because he can't marry her. So we say chalitza you have to give because she's a widow. He can't marry her. Says the Gemara, the Gemara gets a clear-cut statement. It doesn't matter whether his brother and her were just engaged or they were married. Now the difference is there's 2 averas here. A Kohen Gadol, there's an avera, he's not allowed to marry a widow, and then there's a positive mitzvah, he must marry a psula. Now if his brother was married to her completely, then if he then goes ahead and marries her, he's doing 2 averas. She's not a psula anymore, and she's an almana. But if she was only engaged to his brother, and then he died, so she's still a psula. and all that remains is the avera of an almana. And the Gemara asks a question: so why don't we say that the mitzvah, the positive mitzvah of yibum, should push away the avera of almana? There's no like this. The Gemara says. It makes sense when they're married. I say the loisasu. There's a mitzvah say you should be marrying a psula, she's not, and there's a loisa you don't marry a widow. Fine, and we have a rule that ain't asay doichel loisa sev asay. And asay doesn't have the capacity to push away, repel, and asay join the loisa. But if Sachakol, she was only engaged to his brother, why don't we say Yove asay v'yitchel loisa? Let asay come push away the loisa. So we answer, Gzeida bia rishona otu bia shnia. That is as follows. When the only Aveda is that you're not allowed to marry sister-in-law, and the trader says, well, if your brother dies with childless, go ahead and marry her, so then you marry her forevermore. But if there's another Aveda involved as well, for example, Almana, so the mitzvah is only the first night. So once you did the mitzvah of marrying her, the Yisra of Almana remains, doesn't get pushed away forever. So the second night, when there's no longer a mitzvah of Yibum, Yibum is over, now it's just a normal wife, but there's an Yisra of Almana, and that you cannot do. So therefore, what are you going to say? Only you live for one night together? We're worried that once you get together, you're going to live there, you're going to live together forever. So therefore, we ban it. Mishnah. A kohen hedyed, loy yisa islandis. A kohen hedyed should not marry a woman who's known as an islandess. An islandess comes from a ram, a male ram. In other words, she doesn't have the female signs. She's flat-chested, and she has a very hoarse, thick voice, like a male, masculine voice. Eli im kain yesh loy isha banim. Unless he has now. This is because of the mitzvah puravu. So why in the world are we highlighting a kohen? Surprise to everybody. We'll talk about it. So he shouldn't, unless yeshla isha, but if he already has another wife and he has children, so he's fulfilled the mitzvah puravu, then he's allowed to marry her. Rabbi Yehuda says, the main point why we're bringing it is because Rabbi Yehuda, he holds that a kohen hedyed can never marry an islandess. Lo yisa islandess, because he considers her a zoina, or amura b'toida. Why is she considered Zaina? Gemara will talk about it later. But because she cannot bear any children, then it's like you're living with a Zaina. The Chacham disagree totally. They say Ein Zaina. When the Torah says Zaina, what's it referring to? Elagiyaris, a convert, umishachreris, or a maid that was liberated, usheniv elas belas nus, or literally a woman that had even a one-night stand of znus. Now here's a big machlekes are showing you what that means. According to Rashi, Rashi holds that this woman had a one-night stand, even with someone that's merely an avera, a lab. For example, she had a one-night stand with a mamzer. You're not allowed to live with a mamzer. So that renders her a zoina. She can never marry a kohen. But most Rishonim hold that a zoina is only if she lives with somebody, even a one-night stand, with somebody that you couldn't marry. For example, like royas, incest, or a goy. If she had a one-night stand with a goy, she can never marry a kohen. She's a zaina because you cannot marry a goy. But Rashi expands it and says any avera lab like a mamzer. Says the Gemara.
The Mishnah seems to say, I don't understand the wording here, but it seems that the Mishnah is saying that a giorit is automatically a zona.
Yes, it is exactly that. Now, this is actually approved to most Rishonim that hold that it's an Issa Mahatorah for a kohen to marry a Gioris, because the Torah labels them a Zona, even though not that necessarily they had any relations whatsoever. The Torah calls them a Zona because they come from parents that would have lived a promiscuous life. That's how most Rishonim learn. There are some Rishonim that learn only if they themselves had some kind of a affair, and which is a bit difficult from this Mishnah here.
How does that go with V'ahavtem et Hageirim?
What's that do with another?
Because you're demeaning a person by saying she's a zona, but then on the other hand, you have to be good to you have to treat the Geirim appropriately.
You can be very good, but a kohen can't marry them. What's that one thing to another? You have to be very nice to a mamzer, but you can't marry them. One thing doesn't do with another. V'ahavta re'acha kamecha applies to mamzerim as well.
How do Rabbanon deal with, let's say, a non-religious kohen who's, marrying what arguably would be a zona? I mean, are they being michshol on a doraisa?
According to halacha, a kohen cannot marry Geyeris. If you see a couple of times that they bend the rules without going into any specifics.
No. I'm not talking about a Gioris. Forget about a Gioris. Let's just talk about a normal Yid. A normal Yid.
That's right. So when a Rav marries a kohen, it's very problematic.
Yeah.
Very problematic.
Yeah.
And if a Rav doesn't know the laws, then it's one thing. But if he knows the laws, you have to ask very difficult questions.
You have to ask
And-
very difficult questions, or don't ask any questions, and better that you don't ask any questions and don't know.
Not so simple. It's not so
Okay.
simple. But
Okay.
what generally what they do is they ask no questions and will say every Jew has a cheskes kashrus, and we're going to assume that everything is all right.
Right.
That's
And
that's
then,
what they rely on.
right. And when
Right.
they're living together and they're coming to you, then it's a big problem.
Living together, no. What he said the rice is there? No,
What do you
not
think?
the way.
We're talking
Only
about-
Rabbi Lazar holds that a punli haboy al pnuya is called a zayni. We don't hold like a Lazar, right?
Wait a sec. We've talked anyone didn't the Gemara has been discussing anyone who's had any Jewish woman who's had a be'ilas znus.
No,
He's called
a
a
bila
zayna.
of isur. Only if
Oh.
it's isur.
It's only even isur.
That's right. And the machlekes that told you Rashi and other Rishonim, what's the level of Isser? Is it only a level of a lav, or it has to be much more serious than that? Someone that you could never have married, goy or incest. Rabbi Lazar is of the opinion that even a single bachelor and a bachelorette is called a zayna, but we don't pass it from.
Ah, okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, let's get Gemara. My time. What's the reason why we don't want to claim marrying an island? It's from Pibridivya, because there's a mythical Pibridivya, and you cannot do it with a woman who was barren. Then the period, why are you then highlighting koinim? What's the difference of koin or Yisrael? Yisrael also should not marry a woman that's known to be an island, because you have a mitzvah, you have to procreate. You said you're right. The only reason why we're mentioning your koin is because we want to lead into the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says even though we have a wife, he holds even fulfill the mitzvah puravu, lo yisa island, he holds you're not allowed to marry an islandless. Why not? He's zoyna, because he says that an islandless is a zoyna. For amura b'Torah, he says that the Torah says zoyna refers to an islandless. In other words, since she cannot have children, therefore it's like you're living as nus. Only koinin mifkadeh. When it comes to zayna, it's only a question of koinin. Yisrael and mifkadeh. Yisrael has no isser of a zayna, and therefore we talk about koinin. So Maritani koin. Rabbi Yehuda says, my time with Rabbi Yehuda, what's actually the logic behind Rabbi Yehuda? Why should an islandless be considered a zayna? See, because the pasuk says, they ate v'lo yisbo, they weren't full. He's new. And they had znus, but they didn't produce any children. So Rabbi Yehuda understands, any time you have relations and it cannot produce any children, it's considered as if it is znus. That's why he holds an islandless is considered a zayna. Tanya, we learned. Rabbi Eliezer says, Koyin lo yisa esektana. Rabbi Eliezer says that a koyin should not marry a young girl who cannot have any children at that stage. But that's what he says. It's a very ambiguous statement that a kohen should not marry a ketana, a girl under 12 years old. So now the Gemara wants to know why. Reb Chizda said to his friend Rabba, Puk, go out, ayinba. Why don't you look into this Bryce of Rabbi Eliezer, try to understand where he's coming from, because tonight, Boiler Rav Huna Minach. Rav Huna is going to ask you exactly that question. So figure it out. Nofak, he went out. Ayimbo, Rabbi Eliezer, Ayimbo, he looked into it and he decided as follows. Where does Rabbi Eliezer coming from? Why can't the Kohen marry Ketana? Because Rabbi Eliezer, on the one hand, Savalok Rabbi Meir, on the one hand, he follows Rabbi Meir, and on the other hand, the Savalok Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer also holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Which Rabbi Meir, which Rabbi Yehuda? So it goes as follows. Savalok Rabbi Meir follows Rabbi Meir that says, Chayish L'miyut, follows Rabbi Meir that says that that even if there's only a minimum amount of people or circumstances, we take that into consideration. Number one. And the Savalok Rabbi Yehuda also follows Rabbi Yehuda. The Amr says that a kohen cannot marry an islandess because an islandess is a zayin. Now, what's this Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir holds that Yechayish L'miyut. So this girl, because she's a ketana, it's too early yet to tell, will she be an islandess or not? Now, the vast majority of the women are not. But Rameya says, Chayshin l'miyutim. Even if it's only a few, we're concerned that maybe that this girl will turn out to be an idoless. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, a kohen cannot marry an idoless. And therefore, Rabbi Lezer says that a kohen cannot marry a young girl. That's what Rabbi came up with. Says the Gemara, how can it be? First of all, can you tell me that Rabbi Lezer holds like Rameya? It can't be. Why not? The Tanya, we learned, cotton viktana, that a young boy and a young girl cannot give chalitza, because by chalitza it says in the pasuk ish has to be an adult, and if the male has to be an adult, the girl also has to be an adult, and the loy miyavim, nor can there be yibum. Now by yibum doesn't say anywhere adult. Yet Rameya says he cannot do any yibum.
But what did we learn a couple of days ago that a Kohen Gadol says that a bigger opinion should only marry somebody not more than 3 or something, and not certainly not a Begaris. A Kohen Gadol shouldn't marry a Begaris.
No, what are you trying to ask?
Well, here it's saying that he
Kohen Gadol should marry a naira.
Right.
We're talking about a katana now. Katana is under 12, and a naira is between 12 and 12 and a half. What a Kohen Gadol should not marry is 12 and a half plus.
I thought it was also talking about below 12, but below 12 and a half, no?
Yeah, but we hold that you're allowed to marry. It's Rab Meir who holds you're not allowed to. It's only Rab Meir because he's worried. According to Rab Meir, a Kohen Gadol should, and a Kohen Gadol should only marry a girl between 12 and 12 and a half. According to Chachamim, can marry a girl 5, 4, because we're not going to assume that the girl's an islandess. We follow the majority. Okay. So Omru Rab Meir, they said to Rab Meir, we accept what you say, that there's no chalitza for a youngster because it says in the Torah, ish ksiva pasha. In the pasha, it says that when it talks about chalitza, it says im lo yachbis ish, if the man doesn't want, and the girl just like the man. Okay, we equate the woman to the man. They have to be an adult. Why can't do yibum under bar mitzvah and bas mitzvah? So he says here, Amalek, cotton, you know why? As far as the male is concerned, Shema Yimotze Saris. What happens if it turns out to be sterile? And if it turns out to be sterile, then he had no right to marry her. The only reason why by Yevamos we allow them to marry each other is Lahakim Shem Lachi, right? To produce a child. But if he's a sterile, you're not allowed to. And Ketana is saying with her, Shema Timotze Islands. Maybe she'll turn out to be an island, can't have any children. So then you're marrying a sister-in-law for no reason, and it's an Issa of an Imtza Paigin Be'erva. Okay, that's what Rameir said. The Tanya. So Rameir clearly holds that Yibum cannot be done by a cotton and a Ketana. And the Tanya, but we learned in the Brisa that Ketana misyabemes, that a Ketana can be miyabim, but the Einer Chaletz is Divid Rabbi Lezer. So what do you see clearly from here? Rabbi Lezer is not worried. Rabbi Lezer says that when it comes to Yibum, I can have someone under Bar Mitzvah or she under Bas Mitzvah go ahead with Yibum. I'm not concerned that maybe she turns out to be an islandess or he turns out to be a sterile. In other words, Rabbi Lezer gives Rameir. So how can you tell me Pshat and Brisa is of Rabbi Lezer because he follows Rameir? He's worried that this girl, might be from the minority. Furthermore, and then he said Rabbi Yehuda, he also holds like Rabbi Yehuda that a kohen cannot marry an islandess because she's a Zaina. Rabbi Yehuda misavalo, you think he holds like Rabbi Yehuda? Vatani, we learned the Brisa. Zaina. What exactly is a Zaina? So the first opinion is Rabbi Lezer, and he says Zaina Kishma, exactly what it means. Someone who is promiscuous. That's what a Zaina is. Nothing to do with an islandess. So in both respects, you can't, Rabbi Lezer doesn't hold like Rameir, doesn't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Kiva says, Zaina, you know what a Zaina is? Zaina zu mufkeres. Zaina is a girl that has no limits whatsoever, completely hefker. And Ramasya ben Chedesh, Amasya, actually, when we say Zaina Kishma, it means, a Zaina means to stray, that she is a married woman and she's committing adultery. So that's Rabbi Lezer. Lezer holds that a Zaina is a woman who commits adultery. That's a Zaina. Rabbi Kiva says, nothing to do with adultery. Kiva says a woman that is, even a single girl, but if she sleeps around everywhere, that's called a Zaina. In fact, according to Rabbi Kiva, just a one-night stand doesn't make her a Zaina at all. Ramasya ben Chedeshim, afilu holach baila lahashkoisim. Let's say the husband accused her of having an affair, and therefore he warned her and everything else, and now he's taking her to the Beis Hamikdash to get her to drink the water. But on the way they spent the night in a hotel and they had relations. Asa Zaina, he just made her a Zaina because she is forbidden to him, and since she did an Issa by living with him, that makes her a Zaina as well. Rabbi Yehuda Zaina is an island. Yehuda says a Zaina is an island. So it's clearly Rabbi Lezer does not agree with Rabbi Yehuda. The Chachamim say, like our Mishnah, ain't Zaina Elagiyadis, a convert, Shecheres, woman freed, Ushanivelas Bilaznus, or she committed znus with an Isser. Rabbi Lezer is the one we just mentioned before. Rabbi Lezer says, he says, Poni haba ala pnuya, that even a single girl that has, or single guy that has a relation with a single girl, shaloi l'shem ishus, if it's not done for the sake of ishus, also zayin. It's not Rabbi Lezer, it's Rabbi Lezer that makes her a zayin. So clearly, that brisa that says, that Rabbi Lezer says that a kohen should not marry a ketana is not the Rabbi's explanation. He doesn't hold like Rabbi Meir, he doesn't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. So what's going on here? We're talking about a kohen gadol. We're not talking about an ordinary kohen. And a kohen gadol should not marry a ketana. So Brian, this is what we're talking about. A kohen gadol should not marry a ketana. Le'ema, says the Gemara, what are we talking about? Le'ema's kanila. When is the kohen gadol kohen his wife? L'chi gadla, if let's say he marries, and the problem is, and he explains, why shouldn't a kohen gadol marry a girl that's 11 and a half years old? Because since she's underage, she doesn't become his wife really until she's 12. But when she's 12, she's already no longer a psula, and therefore a kohen gadol shouldn't marry her. L'chi gadla buli, when he marries her, she's already. But by the time she becomes an adult, she's already what do you call a bu'ula, because a kedusha ketana is not valid, so therefore it's a problem, and that's what it means here. Rabbi Lezer said a kohen should marry. He meant a kohen gadol. Omar Rabbi says, Rabbi machlei lev. Somebody who has no understanding, it doesn't make sense what you said. Why not? If the father married his daughter, a father is entitled to marry his daughter at any age. So whenever he married her, it became his wife then. It's no longer who cares what happens afterwards. He married her as a psula, it's good enough. He was quiet at that moment. And and if she went on her own, let's say, so the father didn't marry her on her own, which means she's not really married. And so why is only Rabbi Lezer saying that Rabban have the same problem? The Rabban will also agree that if she's 11 and a half years old and she decides to get married on her own, which is no real marriage, comes 12 years old and finally she's an adult now, she can get married, she's no longer a psula. Who would argue with Rabbi Lezer? Why is Rabbi Lezer as if he's a lone opinion? So what's pshat in the brayso? Forget the kohen gadol business. We're talking about kohen hedyot. So why are we telling a kohen don't marry a girl under 12 years old? You know why? Because she's naive and she might be easily seduced by strangers and she'll commit adultery. So why is it only we're worried about a kohen? Why not every Yisrael? So he says as follows. We're worried that maybe the son will seduce her while she's married to him. Why are we only concerned about a kohen or an order Yisrael? So we say that if somebody seduces a girl under 12 years old to commit adultery, it's considered as if rape. Well, I mean, in the Goyish law, it's 16 years old, called digital rape, whatever. But here, by in halacha, if she's under 12, it's considered rape. And but oin is be Yisrael mishashar. So if she's married to Yisrael, it doesn't really affect the marriage. They can still stay married. But a kohen, even if his wife, even if she was raped, can no longer live with a kohen, and therefore we don't want a kohen to marry a girl under 12 years old. Rav Papa goes back and says, no, the kohen gadol. I'll explain Rabbi Lezer, not what you said, a kohen hedyot, and we don't think it's a good idea to marry a young girl. We're talking about a kohen gadol, and why can't a kohen gadol marry a ketana? Who the Tanya is the following brisa. It says the brisa psula, the word psula, he should take a girl. The kohen gadol should marry a girl psula. Yachol ketana, but thought even under 12. Tamalema isha. It says in the pasuk also isha. And it says, Psula ma'amav yikach isha, you should take a wife. Isha is already an adult. Isha yachal begera should be 12 and a half years old. Tamalem psula has to be a psula, which is begeras loses already, we learned before, loses part of her virginity. Haketzad. So what exactly should a kohen gadol do? Yotzra miklav katnus ulchabagul lebasa. Should be over 12, but under 12 and a half. And that's not a brayso, and that's what Rabbi Lezer is saying. Jesus said, I'll tell you the shot in the brayso. Hi Tanu, the following Tana, the Tana we learned, psula, that the kohen gadol should marry a girl, a virgin, ain't psula, ela naira, Psula means someone that's 12 years old. How do I know? It says a pasuk, it talks about Rivka, and it says that Vanaira, the girl, was humble, had a beautiful appearance, and it says a pasuk Psula. So we see that Psula is between 12 and 12 and a half years old. So, which is fascinating, as Taisus discusses over here. Rashi in Chumash says, which comes from the Medrash, that Rivka was 3 years old when she married Yitzchak. Here the Gemara is saying when she married Yitzchak, she was 12 years old. She was a Naira, which is very different. And then Taisus brings a Medrash that actually Rivka was 14 years old when they got married. So Taisus concludes it must be that the Midrashim are arguing with each other how old Rivka was when she married Yitzchak. Rabbi Lazar says we had before Panui Habola Panuya, if a bachelor and a bachelor get married, but didn't have a mind, they didn't do it for a marriage sake. Also Zaina, that makes her a Zaina, she can no longer marry a Kohen. Amram Ein Halacha ki Rabbi Lazar. You should know that the halacha is not like Rabbi Lazar. And even though he's a lone opinion, we had to negate it because we had before a story, the Gemara mentioned before, it sounded like it might be halacha. Rabbi Lazar tells you stop. Mishnah. A person should not in any way avoid the mitzvah puravu, is such a strong mitzvah. Elim ken yesh lebanim. If he already had children, then he doesn't have to do the mitzvah puravu from the Torah's perspective. We'll see in the Gemara tomorrow that midrabanan you still have a mitzvah to have more children. How many children should you have? Beis Shammai will have a number of opinions. In the Mishnah we have Beis Shammai says shnei zcharim, 2 males. Well, Beis Hillel mezachar nekeva, a male and a female. Remember it says Zachar u'nekeva baram. Hashem created a male and a female, so therefore we say it's a male and a female. Now there's a big machlekes Rishonim how to understand this, what we just said. According to many Rishonim, when Beis Hillel says Zachar nekeva means even a male and a female, but if you have 2 males, it's also good enough. According to others, it has to be no, specifically a male and a female, as we'll see in the Gemara. And they're the same argument regarding Beis Shammai. When he says 2 males, does it mean even 2 males or only 2 males? Anyway, says the Gemara. Ha yesh lebani. Once you have children, it sounds from the Mishnah that the Mishnah sounds like that if you have children, you no longer have mitzvah puravu, but meisha lebatul. But you still have to remain married, even though you already fulfilled the mitzvah puravu. You still have to remain married. Misayele, this supports Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Rav Nachman, what did he say? Even though a person might have a number of children, so he fulfilled the mitzvah puravu, also lama b'leisha, it's forbidden for a person to live without a wife. It says, Loi toiv hayoisa adam levadei. It's not a good idea, Hashem said regarding Adam Adishon. It's not a good idea for a person to be on their own. I'll create an Ezer support connected to him. So that's the pasuk he brings. Interesting in Rishonim and Shulchan Aruch it brings that a person should not be single; they should be married. And they say because otherwise you can come to Averis or have lewd thoughts. But our Gemara brings a pasuk. Loi toiv hayois levadei. So they all say it's only asmach. Okay, the Ikad Amri, others say hadayash lebanim. But if he already had children, bottle mepiridiv, bottle namivishta. They take the Mishnah literally. If you already have children, you don't have to have any more children, which means you don't have to be married anymore. No, to have to do Nachman. It's a question of Nachman Shmuel said that even if you already had the mitzvah puravu, a person should still be married. Loi. So Gemara then answers that that's not pshat. Ein lebanim. This is how you learn. Ein lebanim. You always have to be married. But this is how we infer from the Mishnah. If you didn't have children yet, so you still have an obligation of puravu, then noisi isha bas bani, you should marry a woman that's capable of having children. But yesh lebani, once you fulfill the mitzvah of puravu, you have children, then noisi isha, you have to marry a woman, but la bas bani, you don't have to look for a woman that can still bear children. It can be somebody older, somebody younger, somebody can't have children, it's all right. Nafkamina, the difference is limkar sefer Torah b'shvil banim. We learned before that you're allowed to sell a sefer Torah for opinion shvuyim, and you allow sefer Torah for to get married, because such a big mitzvah of getting married. So he's telling you here that if you fulfill the mitzvah of puravu already, you're no longer allowed to sell a sefer Torah. But if you did not fulfill the mitzvah of puravu, then you can sell a sefer Torah to have the money to get married and to afford to start a family. And there's a big machlekes in Rishonim, but what happens later on, we learned there's a mitzvah midrabanan, even after you fulfill the biblical obligation. There's a mitzvah rabbanan, according to Moses, rabbanan, to have more children. We'll see whether you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah in order to have more children. The big machlek is also what happens. You're ready to fulfill the mitzvah puravu. There's a mitzvah to get married, but nobody wants to marry me because I have no money. And the only way I can have money is by selling a Sefer Torah. Whether you're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah for that. The Chalk holds you can, others hold you can't. And also it's brought down in one of the poskim, the Beis Shmuel, just like I think it's Beis Shmuel, just like you're not allowed to sell a Sefer Torah to make money to support yourself, nor can you sell Sfarim. For that reason, Sefer Torah doesn't mean specific Sefer Torah. It can mean even Sfarim for these reasons, unless to get married or something.
I mean your Sfarim,
your own Sfarim, yeah.
Because you could have Mocher Sfarim.
Not talking about a business. We're talking about your own personal Sfarim.
And is that to selling it to Goyim or selling it to Jews?
Jews, Jews, because Sfarim is something. It's not a commodity. Not a commodity. In fact, the Rosh says, today you can fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah by buying Sfarim. So Sfarim have the same value. Beishamai says, we'll have more menachos. Beishamai says, Shnei Zcharim, 2 males. My time in Beishamai, what's going on here? What's the crux of the argument? Yalfinim Moshe, Chivit says, Bnei Moshe, Gershom, Eliezer. Children of Moshe are Gershom and Eliezer. Well, Beis Hillel, so that's what he says. And Moshe had 2 children, Gershom and Eliezer, and divorced his wife. Well, Beis Hillel says, Yalfinim, we learn out, everybody else we learn out from how the world was created. Beishamai, so in other words, the world was created was basically Adam and Chava. So therefore, a man and a woman. Beishamai, why doesn't he learn from that? The fact that Hashem created Adam and Chava ain't done in Efshe Mashiach. That he had no choice. You want to procreate, you want to have a world, populate a world. Obviously, you need a male and a female, but that's you can't learn from that. Well, Beis Hillel, you actually had a Gemara a few weeks ago that machlek is if you could learn Efshe Mashiach. And Beis Hillel Nami and Beis Hillel learned from Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu, after he had 2 sons, he divorced his wife, or he separated from his wife. Amalach, he said Moshe medaited of it. Moshe did his own bidding, so therefore you can't learn from Moshe. And then the Gemara goes on, beautiful Gemara, but I'll leave it tomorrow. Just quickly tell you an interesting pshat here that Miriam and Aaron accused Moshe Rabbeinu of leaving his wife, and then Miriam was punished. Because as the pasuk says, if your father would have spat on you, you'll be punished so long, so therefore you'll be excommunicated, whatever. So the question there is, why was Miriam punished, not Aaron? Aaron also, maligned Moshe Rabbeinu for what he did. So why was only Miriam punished? And what do you mean your father would have spat at you? What father? So it's like this. Miriam went and Amram divorced Yocheved. When Parah came out with his decree about all these boys getting killed, Amram divorced Yocheved. So Miriam went to the father and said, you have to marry Yocheved. You have a mitzvah puravu. Now, already then was born Miriam and Aaron, but Miriam said the halach is like Beishamai, that you need 2 boys and you don't have 2 boys. So Amram acquiesced and he remarried Yocheved, and then he had Moshe Rabbeinu. What was the argument now to Moshe Rabbeinu? Aaron and Miriam both went to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, how can you divorce your wife? There's a mitzvah puravu, and the halach is like Beis Hillel, you have to have a boy and a girl. You only have 2 boys. So Hashem said to Miriam, you went to your father and forced him to get married because you argued the halacha like Beishamai to have a boy and a girl. Now you're going to Moshe Rabbeinu and you're saying the halacha is like Beis Hillel, that you have to, you say you went to your father and said the halacha like Beishamai, you need to have 2 boys and therefore you have to get remarried. Now you're going to Moshe Rabbeinu and you're telling him the halacha is like Beis Hillel, you have to have a boy and a girl. So you're playing games over here. And therefore, you're spitting in your father's face. You never meant what you said. You were just playing around with him. Therefore, you should be punished. But Aaron was consistent. He never said anything otherwise. And therefore, Aaron wasn't punished because he said, Allah is like Beis Hillel, you need a boy and a girl. How come Moshe didn't do that? You'll see in tomorrow's Gemara what happened. Anyway, good luck, everybody.